Hello everybody, I'm Cody. After our Dungeons & Dragons campaign wraps up in a few months, I'm hoping to transition our group over into a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition campaign. So I thought I'd put together a quick little video explaining some of the rules to that system, maybe some of the tricks in Foundry, specifically coming at it from a group that's transitioning from playing a long-standing Dungeons & Dragons 5e campaign in Foundry. So this is mainly for my players, but other people might get some benefit from it. So yeah, let's get into it. First, we're going to look at the character sheet. This is a character I just created. His name's Ruben. He is a dockhand. That's his current career. His career group is Stevedore, and his class is Riverfolk. Basically, when you transition from a career into a different career, it's easier to transition to a different career within the same career group and within the same. Actually, I think you might have to stay within the same class. We'll have to look at those rules as we get there. But basically, when you complete a career, instead of levels like in Dungeons and Dragons, your character has careers, and you can move. When you complete a career, you'll move into the next career and gain more skills and gain more talents, that sort of thing. So first, let's look at characteristics. So characteristics are pretty much like attributes in Dungeons and Dragons, except they're of course different. This is weapon skill. This is your your melee combat skill. Ballistic skill is your ranged combat skill. Strength is pretty much like strength in D&D, lifting things, pushing things. Toughness is just kind of how hardy you are. Also, your toughness bonus will soak up damage. So you can see this characteristic has an initial value and then advances and then a total here for your current value. So this current value here is 34. So my bonus is going to be the tens digit of that. So Ruben's toughness bonus right now is a 3. And that 3 will soak up any 3 points of damage that he gets hit from anywhere on his body. So we'll see that more as we get into combat. This is initiative. This is agility, which is basically hand-eye coordination, fine movements. That I think, right? I get agility and dexterity. Let's see if I can right-click. No, actually, I can probably look it up in. Anyway, agility, dexterity. One of them is manual dexterity, so maybe that's it. And agility is basically how, like, jumping, climbing, that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure that's right. This is intelligence, willpower, and then fellowship is sort of like charisma, basically how well you get along with people. So your characteristics, you're sometimes going to need to roll your characteristics. So basically, do a test against them. So let's say you're trying to move a boulder, right? I have a 39 in strength. I'm going to click that. That brings up this test dialog. So advantage we'll talk about later. That should automatically be calculated. You shouldn't have to change anything here. Now this is basically talents that might be related to this. So you can see, we'll talk about talents in a minute, but basically I have a talent that I'm really good at language. That's not going to help. I have a talent that I can charm people. That's not going to help move a boulder. I also am good at melee brawling. That's not going to help either. Now, if it did help, I could click on these and that would add that bonus in here. Now, test can be different difficulties. The most common one is challenging, which you can see is +0. But there's also, everything from +60 to -30. So I'll give you a difficulty when I ask you to roll a challenge. For this case, we'll just leave it at +0. And then this is the same public-private role. You just leave this at public. Hit location means like if this is going to be if I was punching somebody, this should automatically be checked for those skills. But if you want to check this, it'll add a hit location roll to your roll. But anyway, so set the difficulty. I hit the roll button. It's going to roll percentile dice. So I rolled 39. Now you can see. That's exactly what my skill was. So that's not very useful in this example, but actually let's just roll it again here. In this case, I passed and I moved the boulder, but let's do it one more time, see what it gets here. Ooh, a 9. That's really good. The lower the roll, the better. So you can see I rolled a 9 versus a 39, so I passed. And this SL stands for success level. the higher the success level, the better. And the way you determine success level is basically you take the tens digit of your goal, which in this case is a 3, and you subtract the tens digit of the your roll that you made. In this case is 0, so I get a success level of 3, which results in a success. The higher the success level, the better. You can see I only made a success level 0 here, so my success was marginal. So maybe I just barely moved that boulder, where in this case I moved it all the way so we can squeeze through. That's kind of how tests work. Now, so we looked at characteristics. Now the next thing is skills. Now skills are very much like skills are in Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, they have a linked attribute, and then you can add advances to them. So for example, in this case, I have charm, which takes my fellowship value of 30, adds 5 to it, so it's a 35. So if I master roll a charm roll, I can click here, or I can click here. Should be the same thing. And just like I did before, I can get a marginal success here with +1. Now you can see if I was trying to charm somebody, I could roll here, and then I could click this, because this person, if it's attracted to me, I get a bonus to charm them. Let's see if it adds that bonus. 67. Well, it looks like it didn't add that, so maybe those are just reminders. But we'll get into that more. So that's how skills work, basically. Now, talents are similar to feats in D&D, whereas like you either have it or you don't. Now, some of them can be taken multiple times. So you can see linguistics, I can take it up to 3 times. Dirty fighting, I can take it up to 3 times. Now you can click on these to see what it does. So for example, dirty fighting says, I've been taught all the dirty tricks. I can choose to cause an extra +1 damage for each level in dirty fighting when I hit him with a melee brawling skill. So that's why I might take dirty fighting 3 times, because then I would get a +3 damage while I'm brawling. So you get a certain number of talents, and then you can spend XP. So in this case, you can see I have all of these talents from character creation, but I can spend XP to buy strong back or sturdy later on. One interesting thing, so trappings, basically your equipment, your weapons, your clothing, stuff. One interesting thing is that armor is actually on a specific body part. So if I was wearing a helmet, it would be listed here on my head. And then if I get hit on my head, then that armor points would subtract from damage, just like my toughness. And some monsters and stuff, they may have a toughness of 4 on their body, but only a 1 on their head because they don't have armor on their head, something like that. So there's some flexibility in the system there. Let's see. One interesting thing is this sort of like, D&D has conditions, but the conditions in this game are a lot more complicated, a lot more in depth. So when you get a like say you get a prone condition, you'll check this. You can also click here, I think, to see what that means. And then if you get critical wounds, those will go here, as well as corruptions, mutations, that sort of thing. Lots of fun stuff like that. Speaking of wounds, you start with a number of wounds. These are the same as hit points. It's D&D. But you can also get critical wounds. When you drop down to 0 wounds, you get the prone condition. And then if you get any negative wounds, you can't go below 0. Those get to be critical wounds. And in this case, if I get 3 critical wounds, then something even worse happens to me. Maybe dying. I'm not sure. We'll review those rules. But that's kind of how wounds work. We'll see that more as we do a combat example. Let's see. That seems to be it. There's magic. Neither one of my example characters use magic. And there's also prayer. Neither one of these characters use praying. But those act similar. You have talents that you get. I think it's like read magic or speak magic, sorry. And you'll use those to cast your spells and stuff like that. We'll see how that works if we have magic characters, which we probably will. All right, let's do a quick combat example, and I'll show you kind of how that works in Foundry. In this example, let's see, my two characters are just coming out of this tavern, and they get ambushed by 2 cultists. These cultists are hoping to use them or their body parts in some kind of nefarious rituals. So we'll add them. Now, of course, we could do surprise and perception check, opposed perception checks, all that sort of thing like we would in D&D, but in this case, we're just going to jump right into combat. Add them to the combat tracker. I think it did it. Let's pull out the combat tracker. Yeah, okay. So I'll roll initiative for everybody. And then I think the way this is working, I'll have to look at the settings. There's several different ways you can calculate initiative, but I think what this is doing is taking their initiative score and then adding either a random number to that or yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to review that, but anyway, this will get us our combat initiatives, and we'll begin combat here. Okay, a couple interesting things about combat. First of all, there's this thing called advantage. If you right-click on your token, there's a blue thing up here at the top. This is your advantage. Advantage kind of simulates the ebb and flow of combat. So as someone starts getting like, they feel like they're doing better in this combat, it benefits them. Sort of like the momentum in a football game or something like that. So this person, so basically you gain advantage by winning an opposed test in combat, or by charging. There's a few other ways to get it, but charging is the one I want to illustrate here. To charge, you basically, so in combat you're going to have basically the same as D&D. You've got a move action and an attack action. Charging means you move up to your move value. Actually, you have to be able to charge, you have to move at least your movement value. So your movement value, we're going to kind of fudge it a little bit and use these as squares. Really, these are supposed to be yards, and these squares are actually 5-foot squares. But anyway, we're just going to say that this is 4 squares. So if I run, I can do 4. I mean, if I walk, I do 4 squares. If I run, I can do 8. I can walk up to 8. If I run, 16. And that's you have to run actually I think, well, anyway, we'll figure all that out, but I can move 4 squares without having to run, basically. So he's going to do his move action, and then if you are charging, you have to do a melee attack at the end of your movement, but because he charged, he gets a +1 advantage. Now, this is the thing. You're going to want to always target. Now, I know some of you are in the habit of targeting during our D&D games, but not always. But in this system, you're going to want to target. So you target by right-clicking on your target and hitting the little, target button. So the cultist is going to target Ruben, and he's going to do his melee attack. Now, this... he does not have a weapon. Monsters have these kind of weapon traits. Like, he doesn't have the same kind of skills monsters don't. Anyway, basically, he's got this knife that's simulated by this weapon. He's going to click it. He's going to roll it. We'll see. We'll show you what it rolls. So, okay. So this is what's called an opposed test, which means he's lunging at him, attacking with his dagger. Ruben's going to be fighting back, kind of trying to deflect that blow using his own weapon. And let's see, what does this say? Okay, so he had a skill of 40, which he probably had a skill of 30. Let's see if we look. Yes, so see, he has a weapon skill of 30, but since he has that advantage, that gave him a +10. Each point of advantage gives you a +10. So he rolled a 17, which is really good, versus that 40, which means a success level of +3. So the way it determines its damage is it takes your weapon damage, which in his case is 6, and it adds your success levels to that, which means 9 damage. And then it also rolls a hit location, which in this case is the body. So he's jabbing at Ruben's body with his knife. Now, it's Ruben's turn to... So this says cultist is targeting Ruben. So Ruben is going to roll his weapon skill as well. So Ruben has a dagger and a boat hook. Since the boat hook's cooler, he's going to use that. It also does more damage, as you can see. So when you're targeted, you just click same way as any other roll. And he rolled 25, which is usually would be a very good roll, but in this case, it's not quite as good. So you can see he only got a success level of 2, The cultist got a success level of 3, so the cultist won. Cultist won against Ruben by 1 success level and a damage 7. So what it does is it subtracts the success level of the cultist from the success level of Ruben to get 1. It adds that to the cultist's weapon to get a 7. And so 7 damage is coming into Ruben's body, right? So what I would do is I would right click here and say apply damage. And that's going to take that 7 damage. It's going to subtract Ruben's toughness bonus on his body, which in this case is 3, and any armor points on his body, which in this case is 0. And it's going to apply that damage. So Ruben has lost 4 of his hit points, and you can see that here, right here. So he now has 7 of 11 hit points left. So a pretty substantial hit from the cultist, right body blow. Now, the cultist has won an opposed test, so that means he gains advantage. So he now has 2 advantage. Also, when two characters are in a melee combat, they both have something called the engaged condition, which is similar to how it works in D&D. It means they're kind of struggling back and forth, and it's hard to basically disengage, and there's some penalties if you don't fight right during the turn. Okay. Let's move. What happened to my combat tracker? Let's move on. Okay, this cultist, I'm just going to say he is just going to stand there and kind of taunt them. He's making sure there's nobody else around, that sort of thing. We're going to move on to Berlinda's. So Berlinda has a dagger and a sling, right? She has a sling with 9 stone bullets. So she's going to use that sling so we can show ranged combat. So she's going to use her move to move kind of back out of the way. She's going to target the cultist, and then she's going to use her sling, and she's going to roll it. And she rolls terribly. Okay, this is great. This lesson shows a couple of different things. Okay, so the first thing is that ranged weapon attacks are not opposed. So the cultist does not get to try to block her shot with his dagger. The only thing about that is if you had a shield, then you could use your shield to block ranged attacks. But for the most part, ranged weapons are not opposed attacks. Now, another thing that's interesting thing is, so here she totally missed, right? She rolled an 88 versus a 42 for -4 success levels. Totally missed. Her shot went flying off. But what's worse is she rolled a double. So an 8-8 is a double. That means it's a critical. If she had passed this, like say it was a 22, then it would have been a critical hit. But in this case, it's a critical fumble, which means she would need to click on this to see what bad thing happens. You mishandle your weapon or you drop your ammunition, you miss your next action. Okay? But I want to show another thing. So I don't think I talked about this before, but your character has these things called fate points and resilience points, and they're tied to these other points called fortune points and resolve points. So you get 2 fate points, right? This character gets 2 fate points. Those are pretty much your fate points for the whole deal. Like to get an extra fate point, something massive has to happen. But fortune points are replenished every session. So you basically get 2 fortune points every session. Now, fortune points you can spend to either re-roll a roll or to add 1 success level to a roll, right? And since they replenish every session, you probably want to spend those, okay? And fate points you can also spend, like permanently, but that's mainly to last ditch, I'm not going to die. So if you're going to die, you can use a fate point to basically not die. We can go into that more when it gets when that comes up. But for the most part, you don't want to spend a fate point, because then from then on, like if Berlinda spent one of her fate points, From then on, she would only be getting 1 fortune point every session, right, instead of 2. So, but I mean, it's better than dying. So anyway, in this case, I think Berlinda would probably want to spend 1 of her fortune points to re-roll this, right? An 88's bad, fumble's bad, she loses her next action. Yeah, so we're going to right-click here, and this gives us the options to use a fortune point to re-roll, to use a fortune point to add +1 success level, or to take a dark deal to re-roll, which say you don't have any fortune points, but you really want to re-roll a roll. Well, there's always the ability to make a dark deal. You get a corruption point, which we can talk about corruption later, but you get to re-roll the roll, right? It's all good. So whenever you want to take a dark deal, just let me know. I'm sure we can work something out. So anyway, in this case, she's going to use a fortune point to re-roll. I'm going to click it. She rolls again. Ooh, a 12. Much, much better. So in this case, 12 versus 42 is a +3, which is 9 points of damage. Success. Hit him in the left arm. Now it thinks because I was targeting this cultist that we're going to do an opposed roll. But since this isn't an opposed roll, you can just click this little down arrow for unopposed. And then it'll say Belinda won by 3 success levels for 9 damage, left arm. I can right click. I can apply the damage. And that takes 6 hit points off of that cultist, which means he is now down to 6 wounds, right, out of his 12. Another thing I wanted to show is critical hits. Let's move on to Ruben's turn. Oh, one thing is, whenever you take damage, you lose all of your advantage, right? Now, Belinda won this test. She succeeded in the test, but she did not win an opposed roll, so she doesn't get advantage for ranged combat. So that's kind of one of the disadvantages of ranged combat. The advantage is, well, it's not an opposed roll for one thing. And another thing is, if you are hitting with an opposed roll, if you do a critical hit when you're defending an opposed roll, that's an automatic attack back onto the attacker. So being in melee combat is inherently dangerous, whereas it's a little bit safer to sit back and ping people with stones, right, from your sling. Okay, so Ruben's going to target this cultist. He is going to swing with his boat hook. He is going to roll a 98, which is a terrible roll. -5 success levels. Terrible. Impressive failure. He's going to use his fortune point to re-roll that for sure. And an 83 is still terrible. Yeah, that's still pretty bad. Just because I want to show critical hits, let's edit this roll and say he rolled a 22. Okay, that second roll was amazing. He rolled a 22, 2 success levels, and a critical hit. So instead of doubling the damage, critical hit has this awesome critical hit tables that you're going to roll on. So let's roll and see what we get. Ooh, it's a gut wound. So I think there's a description here. Let's see if we can click on it. Okay, well, you contract a festering wound and gain 2 bleeding conditions, plus it counts as 4 wounds, and it's the location of the body. So what I can do is I can click on this cultist, and I can drag this gut wound over, drop it in here. Now that shows that he has this critical gut wound here. I think I can click on it. No. If I go to effects to here. Yeah, okay. Some of them have some really great description. This one must not. You just contract a festering wound. You gain 2 bleeding conditions. So basically I can give him 2 bleeding conditions, which if you click here, bleeding conditions, lose 1 wound at the end of every round, ignoring all modifiers, penalty of -10. Really bad. You can eventually run, you can fall unconscious, and then even after you remove the bleeding, you gain fatigue because of the blood loss. It's bad, right? But that is not nearly as bad as some of the other critical hits. Like, let's see, can we click on it, see if we can find some broken collarbone? Yeah, I mean that's bad. gain the unconscious condition till you must suffer a broken bone, major injury. Bone is, yeah, badly broken, resting an odd angle, splintered, point. Yeah, it's bad. These critical hits, don't mess around. And you can see it automatically added the bleeding conditions here. This module does a really good job of automatically adding the conditions. So this cultist is pretty much dead. Okay, what else did I want to cover here? We looked at conditions, damage, critical hits, corruption points. We can go over corruption as it happens. Basically, after you get when you're around sources of corruption, basically creatures from the dark powers, mutants, or anything that can corrupt you, you're gonna roll tests, and if you fail, you're gonna take corruption. You get a certain amount of corruption, you can basically form mutations, and you can spend some of this resolve points or kind of for preventing corruption or preventing mutations. So there's some systems around that we'll go over as we get there. The main thing you want to know is that corruption's bad. Stay away from sources of corruption. Stay away from the dark powers, and you should be fine. And I mean, it's not like this is a dock hand. What are you going to be doing around corruption? Yeah, I'm sure it will happen. Let's see, what else did I want to cover? We talked about critical hits. We'll talk about magic as that happens. So I think that's a basic overview of some of the combat mechanics, and some of how the Foundry will work. Mainly, you want to make sure you always target who you're swinging at. Let me know if you have any questions. Anybody, if you notice any rules that I do wrong or any Foundry tips or tricks that might be helpful to us, please put them in the comments. I'm looking forward to this campaign. Looking forward to the last part of our Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I've been really enjoying this Foundry and you guys and everything else. So see you guys later.